Welcome, Ji. Let's start our Java tutorial next part. And today I am going to discuss with you about the language basic. So the first topics on the basic part is about the variables. All we have learned in the last lecture about the objects. Object store their state in a field. So we have discussed key object have generally fields and attributes. So sometime in a Java as a programming language, this field also called and known as a variables. So we are going to discuss about the variable naming rules. What are the rules when you are going to define some, and what kind of basic convention as well as, and we are also discussing about the basic data types and like primitive data types and some strings, and also what are the default values for these data types and what are the meaning of literals, how literals works. So let's start. Before starting, it's let's we discuss about how we can use in a variable in Java. Let's in the basic what the syntax. The basic syntax of any variable declare inside the Java. Let's we have a right. So first we have to declare variable, and second steps you we have to initialize the value, initialize the value, and third steps would be use the value, use the variable. So here steps how to declare variable. So the syntax is we have write in a data type like we have write in data types, and then say variable name like x. So here this is the your variable declaration. How to initialize this? Initialize means this is the x value, and here assign the respective integer value like 5. Okay, this is your part of your initialization. And third how to use. Let's say I'm going to use the in variable like print the value of x, and if you run this code, so you are getting the value of 10. So be note that whenever sometime also you can the first steps you declare your variable name, and second steps you initialize the some value, and third steps you are going to use. So these three steps you also language support, you can initialize in the direct int, let's key y equal to 5. So you're here what you did declare as well as initialize. So these two steps can be combined. Okay, so you can declare variable first and then initialize. Sometime you can use the both the same way, just declare with initialization as well as. So these are the basic syntax about to this is your data types which we'll discuss. This is your variable we'll discuss, and this is your default value known as a literals. So we'll discuss detail about what are the different data types available in Java, and this is the if this is the variable name. So what is the rules of variable names? What kind of variable name you can give? And this is the literal parts which we will discuss. What kind of value you can assign here. So let's discuss in detail so that you will know the complete all the data types and what are the rules regulation while creating the variable names. What are the restriction while creating the variable name? So first things, as a programming language define the following kinds of variables. Okay, the following kinds of variables. So we'll discuss what kind of variables we can declare. First, he's talking about the instance variable. Sometimes it's known as non-static fields. As you know, sometimes fields in the programming language known as a variable. These two terms are where generally while the theory parts we are discussing about the fields and attributes, but while talking about the programming language, we are generally refers the variable, right? So technically, as you know, objects store their individual state, maybe a non-static field. Okay, the field declare without static keywords. Non-static fields also known as a instance variable. Okay, when you declare any variable inside a particular class that doesn't have a static keywords, that's not an instance variable. So let's look at example. Let's we have create class employee student. Student is the class, and you can declare variable like integer age or string name. Okay, so whenever you are declaring any class, and in this class you are declaring the variable, okay, so if this is the class syntax, and here you are declaring one variable is, you have not specified here the your static. This is the instance variable. Similarly, this is the instance variable. So first variable is the instance variable. Inside a class, you are declaring any variable that doesn't have a static keyword. That means this is your instance variable. And next they about talk about the class variable. Class variable, it's known as a sometime your static field. Okay, let's a class variable is any field that declare with a static modifier. This tell the compiler there is exactly one copy of this variable is exist. That means the static means key for one class, this is only one copy are going to exist in the memory, regardless of how many times of the class has been instantiated. In this class, we have created the 10 number of object or 20 number of object, but the static data member have only one copy, and all the objects are sharing those fields. Okay, let's write another class. Let's class ABC, and you can declare like a static int your count. Okay, and here let's here, and just you can okay, and here let's you create the object of ABC obj, and you can create a new ABC class. Okay, and here just say object dot your count. What is the variable name? Count. Okay, and let's you say some setter getter method. So, and here you just uh, not a set, just increment. You just say increment, and here you say count plus plus. So here you say your why abc class survey dot increment. Why not getting increment? Probably object. Let's see. So as this as a class static data member, you can access from your class name. You can also, if you just this and you can increment two times and just s out and print abc dot get count, and if you run, you will get a counter 2. Okay, you are getting as a count 2. And if you are, let's create another object. Here you can also, generally this is not recommended way, but you can use this this as well as, okay. And if you try to run it, it will work. The general recommendation is don't use a static methods with the help of your object. But if you, let's create another object of the same, let's say we have created another object like object 1, the 1, here the object 1 and object 2, and you are invoking object 1. Here is emphasized new object, so this static member should be different, but let's output it will be the only one copy will create on the memory perspective. So here you getting a 4. How getting a 4? The reason is that let's see here object, this is the object 1 created, object 1 created, and this class have one static member. The static member is not a part of your object itself. This is the shareable copy. This is the, your count variable, and whenever you can increment here, so they have increment 1, you can increment here, they increment to 2. Here you print to get the count variable, you are getting a 2. You are creating another object, okay, and you are incrementing again. So he this object also accessing the same static data member. So they are getting a 2 already, and then increment, this is a 3. Then you are again increment, you are getting a 4, and if you are here displaying, you are getting a as output 4. So here 2 first, and this is the 4. So this is the concepts of static variable. So generally, a class can have, you can declare any static variable, and that static variable is shared with the all object. The general recommendation, whenever you are going to use any static variable, you know that this is the for per class. If there is one class ABC, you can create a lots of object of this class. But this count variable is not created for per instance, but this is a shared for the all object. So this is the second type, is your class variable. Third types talking about your local variable. Local variable are similarly how to an object store its state in a field. Similarly, method will often store its temporary state in the local variable. So these previously we talked about the instance variable and static variable. This is the part of your class. Okay. Now local variable is the part of your method. If any method declares some want to store some temporary states of this in a local variable. So let's say, and similarly syntax semantics to declaring any variable this way. And let's look how local variables. And one thing notice that key local variable are only visible to the method in which they are declared. They are not accessible from rest of the classes. The local means they have a sometime not only method, you can also say for creating any local variable, any for identify key which is the local variable and not local variable, there is only kind of local keywords. Okay, the local variable is only determine determine come entirely from the location where which variables are declared. Okay. So generally, which is the between the opening and closing brace of your method. So generally, method start with the closing brace and opening brace. Between that, whatever you declaring any variable, that is the local variable. Let's if in this methods, let's I can write like a public uh, let's return teacher get value. Here is the get value. In this this is the year, this is the your opening brace, and inside if you are declaring variable integer p equal to 20, eh? And if you want to do calculation here, uh, s out like p multiply by 2, and then you have to return that's p. Here let's give result equal to p multiply by 2, and here you are just printing result and returning a result. So here you can say these are the local variable. They are declared inside your method. This p variable, r variable, you cannot access from the object of this class. You can access this method name, but the local variable r scope is only within the defined. But if you are declaring this variable as a any variable, your instance variable or a class variable, that is accessible from outside of the class and object as well. From outside of this class, this is the ABC class, and you are in the main method, you are able to access this increment. You are access this is the increment method. Okay. Similarly, you can access this variable if this is the public data member. Okay, so please be noted that local variables declare inside a particular opening brace and closing brace. This is known as a local variable. Anything declare inside a opening brace and a closing brace in a method known as a your local variable. This local variable is only accessible inside the only this method. So uh, sometime you also noted about some kind of parameter variable. Like we are writing public static void main, this is your parameter. Okay, so here the argument variable is a parameter type method, and this is the important thing to remember, this that the parameter are always classified as a variable, not a field. Fields are basically the part of your class that store some state. But as a parameter, whatever passing, this is the variable, and this is also considered as a local of that method. Okay, and this apply to the other parameter except in the constructor as well as such as a constructor and elsewhere. So what I'm trying to say, let's say here I'm writing a like here, trying to take a multiplier. Here I'm passing as a multiplier. So here what I'm trying to say is this is your parameter variable. Parameter variable. This variable cannot say this is the field or state, but here if this is a field, maybe this field can be static and non-static, but this is only variable, and this is also considered as a local. This variable only available inside this parameter. So parameter variables are local variables, similar kind of local variable, but you cannot check this is the kind of state. And this is also local variable. This is a special kind of local variable. Whatever things you are passing in any argument as a parameter argument, this is the local variable. Okay, and you can hear a static variable and the uh, calculation. Okay, so here one class have a this is the instance variable. Instance variable, this is also an instance variable, or you can say field, you can say uh, attribute. This is a non-static variable. Okay, these static variables are created with each copy of object. If you create object 1, they have a separate copy. If you create object 2, they have a separate copy. But a static variable known as a this is the instance variable, this is the non-instant, yeah, static field. They have only one copy for all the object, and these are your local variables which are created inside your method, and these are your parameter variables, also considered as a local of your local variable. So finally we have discussed your instance variable and non-instance variable and your local variable and your parameters. So it's clear, hope. So let's talking about the naming convention. If I am giving writing the variable name, so this is the very important parts whenever you are writing a code, you are developing a software in a large project. Then your naming names a variable would be very significant in the case of the someone, maybe after you someone reading a code and that your variable name is making sense, they can easily understood the meaning what the variable the purpose use. So what kind of rules you have to follow while writing giving the name for a variable? So as every programming language has its own set of rules and a convention for a kind of a name that you allow to use. Java programming language is the no different. So the rule and convention for a naming variable can be summarized here. So what the very first rule about the case sensitive. Your B note, your variable is the case sensitive. Case sensitive means a variable may be any identifier, an unlimited length sequence of any letters or digit, and beginning with the letter dollar or the underscore. The three symbols you can start your variable name with a letter or any dollar symbol or underscore. Okay, so to always begin your variable name with a letter, generally not recommend to use the dollar and underscore. Additionally, and but similarly convention exists that underscore character and technically legally is the allow, but the variable name underscore this practice discourage. Okay, and the white space is not allowed in the variable. If you're trying to say some white space, it's not permitted. Rest you can permit it, but when you are starting your any variable name with a letter, dollar symbol or underscore, and be clear your case sensitive. Let example, let's see, I am declaring here a variable name age. So here is your age. You can also start with the underscore. Okay, also start with the dollar symbol, or also start with the, but you cannot start with a number. If you start this is doesn't allow unexpected. Okay, so be care whenever starting your variable name, you should not start the digit. You start with any letter, and general convention here first letter will start, or you can use the underscore a dollar symbol. And if this age variable and if you write another age variable like this, both are the two different things. So this is the case sensitive. This is the different variable. This is the different variable. So please be ensure that whenever you are giving the variable name, that variable name is case sensitive. Small and upper lowercase. Both are the different two variables, not one variable. But you cannot declare two variable in the same. Uh, you cannot declare the two variable in the same class because they are duplicate. Okay, this is already available. So please be first the same variable you cannot declare multiple times, and all the variable either case sensitive, small letter and capital letter. Be ensure that your variable name should be start with characters, maybe late any underscore or dollar symbol. But generally practice is that you always start with a letter start from the small letter. Okay. And the next rule about uh, uh, as a sequence of characters, which is the variable name, maybe as I discussed, letter, digit, or dollar symbol, and underscore. Okay, the first place can be letter, dollar symbol, or correct underscore. But as a convention say, uh, common sense apply to this rule as well as. So the same things here, please be note, you can write your variable name as descriptive so that key other developer can easily take the meaning of that. Generally, but as a compiler doesn't allow, you cannot write LKS, C, G, anything you can allow. But as a, when you are doing developing application, you try to write your descriptive name so that anyone read the meaning. Let's give a declare variable speed instead of declaring s. So someone can identify s variable means referring to the speed. So that's the self descriptive. The general guidelines, you try to write your variables with the intention why we are writing this variable, and variable name should be start with a dollar or underscore or letter. The general recommendation is you can always start with a small letter. And next rule about the you can say if your name of the variable with more than two words, then in the case of let's key gear ratio. So if you are starting the your variable name with the two words, so general guidelines, you first your word letter is a small letter and second letter with your capital letter. Okay. And this is also very common convention if you are declaring any variable with like a final variable, static final. So you try to use as uppercase, and if you have two words, you can append with the underscore. So this is the very general guidelines. When you are writing your variable name that have a more than two words, then you are appending. If this is a non-static variable, instance variable, you can either first words as a small letter and second first character as a capital letter. But in the case of your final static variables, you try to use the uppercase all the words and you are appending the two words with the underscore. So these are the basic rule about the variable name. So now let's, as you we have a say is that in initially this is your first declare the variable name. So we study the rule how you can declare your variable. What is the variable name? What the naming convention? Okay. Now let's discuss these are the data type. Okay, so what kind of data type as a Java programming language support? Like here I'm using int. What other data types available? So let's discuss. Okay, first thing you be noted the Java programming language is a statically typed language. There are two types of language in the market. You can some dynamically typed language as and statically typed language. What the meaning is that ki, whatever variable you are declaring, at the compile time your compiler know this variable is what kind of value they are stored. They are storing the integer value, float value, character value, string value, what. So at the compile time each variables have assigned is the data types. So this is known as statically types. Some programming language support the dynamically type, means ki at the run times they decide ki this variable is what types of variable. So please be note Java is a statically typed language. Means all the variables which we are using the compiler must able to recognize your data types. Okay, statistical type, which means all the variables must be declared before they can use also. If you are something going to use without declaring what the types is, their compiler that's here. Here let's I am going to use let's guess out like a variable name k. What is the k? It doesn't know. K cannot resolve symbol. If you want to use like integer, here define integer k, then he recognize k, but he say you cannot initialize. You have to be noticed that in a local variable, you by default value is not initialized. But in the case of your class variable, instance variable, by default value are initialized by the compiler. So be noted that whenever you are declaring any variable inside a local, please be ensure that before using you have to initialize some value. Okay, this rule is only apply for your local variable. If you are declaring some variable like here your age variable is non-static, yeah, static variable, by default value is compiler assigned to you. Okay, the instance variable and non-static variable are have a default value, but in the case of local variable, because why this is local, because we have declared this variable inside opening curly brace and closing curly brace of a particular method. So this is the local variable. The local variable should have a compiler does not assign default value. So here they say before Java is static type language and must first be declared before they used. Okay. So as you know, key the variable so data type determine the value it may contains and plus the operation that may be performed on it. So if you are like int gear here equal to 1, why this gear is a variable, you are assigning a 1 is an integer value. So this variable which kind of a value can hold this data type declare. Data type is specified this variable is only hold integer value. You cannot assign a float value, you cannot assign a string value because this variable say I am an integer types. So Java programming language support 7 primitive data types, and primitive data types is determined by the language name as a how as a Java programming language know this is the primitive data types. Okay, by the reserve keyword. So you can say this is the int as a reserve keyword, char as a reserve keyword. You cannot use as a variable name. So Java as a compiler as a language define set of keywords as a reserve keyword so that this can only use for a data types. And apart from this reserve keywords, you can give your any variable name. Okay, show and primitive values do not share with the primitive other value. If this is the value 1 is the independent value and this one can be assigned to the different variable, but this is not shareable to the other primitive value. Okay, and overall 8 primitive data types support as a Java programming language. So let's discuss what is eight data primitive data types and what are the keywords used for them. Your show about the first is of the byte data types. Okay, and this data type is used for a 8-bit signed two's complement integer. That means this data type is very smallest integral data part, and the maximum and minimum value of this is the minus 128 to 127. This is the range. If you are going to use any variable that have a range only between the your minus 128 to 127 plus 127, you can use your byte data types. Okay, byte data type is a 8-bit signed variable. Okay, and byte data type can be useful as saving memory. Okay, in a large array, you can say, where memory saving actually matter. They can also be used to place of integer. Means here you can use int also as well as byte as well as, but the fact is that key, if you know key I am going to only use the 1 to 27 the value for this variable, so why I am going to int take a larger memory footprint, but byte take only 8 bit. So how can declare? Uh, Here you can declare a byte your mm, data. In this way, you can declare byte data types. And this is the in the memory whenever they are going to store in memory, and this is take only one 8-bit space. Okay, and next data type about sort. Sort is also kind of data types, sort data types that take a 16-bit. If you want, we are going to store a value from 32,760 to between this. Means you know this variable value can be hold range between the minus 32,000 to plus 32,000. Okay, so in this scenario, you are declaring a variable as a data type is a sort. Okay, and we know that it so whenever you're going to store this in a memory perspective, they are consuming 60-bit memory. So similarly, you can declare here this is your 8-bit memory and your sort like sh, and this can your 16-bit. Okay, so this is the two. This is the integer data type, byte data type, and sort data types. And next about talking about the third about the your int data types. When you are going to use the int data types, they first take 32-bit memory space while storing. Okay, and similarly you want to range between the minus 2 to the power 31 to 2 to the power 32-bit. Okay, then this is data types you use, and you can use it in data types to represent the unassigned 32-bit integer, and this is the range from minimum to maximum available. So be clear when you use, you know ki I am going to take a variable between minus this to maximum this range, then you can use to int. The int similarly, we have declared your int variable age, and this takes your 32-bit space. So please be ensure you, if you are really going to declare variable that hold the what maximum range value. If the maximum range is higher than the byte, then you can use your sort. If you want to hold a variable that hold the higher value than the sort range, then you can use integer. And the next data types we will talk about the long, and long data type is a 64-bit memory consumes, and this is the maximum range from minus 2 to the power 63 to maximum 2 to the power 63 minus 1. Okay, and also can please be ensure key what the use of the long data types. Really, it's take a larger memory footprint if you are declaring like long lng, uh, and that take your 64-bit. Okay, so all are the integers value, but the integer numbers value, but these numbers have a different upon your memory consumption. So please ensure that when you have to use your uh, which data types. Okay, you are going to use okay, you are going to use byte, a short, or int, a long, depend upon the your maximum range. And next, this is your number system, and sometime we have a floating number as well. As for that, there is a data types known as a float. Sometime you want to store like a 2.5, yeah, 3.6. This is the floating number, so with the decimal. So for that you have a one data type, basically the float data types that take a 32-bit space. Okay, and show with the recommend that, and please be ensure for this we have a from Java 8 onward we have a kind of some new classes also come like I'm discussing later about the big decimal and number and string as well as, but for the floating number the basic data types is a float. So how will you use this is the float, float FLT, and this take your 32-bit space. Okay, and sometime if your range is bigger than this 32-bit, then you can use your next about the double as well as. If you want to your floating point number bit range between the 64-bit higher range, then you can use the double. And here you can use double here, and this take your 64-bit memory footprint. Okay. So be aware key whenever you are declaring any variable data types, you take care in mind key we are what the maximum range the value can hold. If you know, you can use the specific value. If you don't know the range key what the maximum value could be for this variable, so you should use as a max range value. There is one special data type. Sometimes we want to check some kind of conditions. If the condition is true or false, for those we have a boolean data types. These boolean data types have only possible two value, true or false. Okay. So these data types simply used to check the condition some true or false is like that. So you can use this as well as like boolean check condition something. Okay. They have a possible value true or false. Okay. By default, these variables are declared inside in a as an instance variable. The default value would be the false. We'll discuss default value as well. Okay. And next about sometime generally we use sometime we use your data types as a char elements. The char data types use a single 60-bit Unicode character. Its minimum value is the /U0000 and maximum range between the /UFF, that is 65,534. So this character is some kind of say unsigned integer value. Okay, this is the range of you can say 16-bit. You can declare your char ch, and this is your 16-bit unsigned. Yeah, 16-bit value consumed as unsigned. This is the from unsigned, not the negative, unsigned. Unsigned value, because this range from the 0 to 65,000, not from negative. So character is a kind of like unsigned an integer number, but that is the represented as in the 60-bit. In addition to 8 primitive language, we now consider these the 8 primitive data types. And Java also support an special for provides the special support of characters as a strings. So other languages they support one kind of data type is strings. String is sequence of character. So for Java, not creating a primitive data types, but they created the one class for you. So java.lang.string, this is the class which handle the sequence of characters. And how to know? So enclosing your characters a string within a double quote will automatically create a new string object for you. If you declare double quote and write your sequence of characters here, by default this is the your string object. Okay, by default you can assign in the inside the your string data types. So by default lots of feature about the string. If you want to more detail about the what is strings and about what are the different way to creating the object and why say it's immutable, so please look my we have already created the one video for the strings. So string object is immutable, which means the once created and their value cannot be changed. If you are creating the variable s, you cannot change, and a string class can string class is technically not a primitive type. Java have only these primitive types which we discussed, and but we look like we are using the string as a primitive data type, but being aware string is not primitive data type, string as an object. Java provides some special feature to string class so that you can directly assign the some sequence of character known as string. Okay, so considering the special support given to it by the language, you'll probably think later. So if we want to detail out what is the string, what the meaning of mutable, how you can what the how to change, not change, what kind of different parameter available with the string class, please look my recorded video. So here you can say we can declare like a string name equal to okay. So here you can say look like we can declaring some variable like anything, but here this is all the primitive data type, but this is not primitive data type, this is the string object. But as a Java programming language, given the special privileges, given a special feature where you can assign the some string literals to this variable. This is internally automatically created the string object like the new string object generally this way, but as a compiler support of this. So let's now we talked about the list of primitive data types, and let's talk what is the default value. Okay, what is the default value for this? Default value means if you are declaring some variables, if you are not assigning any value to that variable, so as a compiler what value by default they are assigned. So it's always necessary to assign a value with when the field is declared. This is the guidelines. Okay, you have generally do not assigning any variable. You know, in the later you can assign. So the field class data member say in class you declare static field and non-static field are declared but not initialized. So will be the set of reasonable default value the compiler is assigned. Generally, this default value would be the 0, or for a string and any object, default value is the null. But depending upon the data types, what data types your variable have. If your variable data have a data types integer, the default value would be 0. If your data types is a variable is a string class, then your data type is string, then the default value would be the null. So relaying such a default value is generally let's so these are the with respect to data types. If your data type is byte, then the default value is 0. Your short default value is 0. Your integer default value is 0. Long default value is 0. LL symbol, this is the long letters, and this is the float for 0.0.0. F space the float for the double 0.0 hyphen d. This is the specified double, And for your character, this is the 0. You can slash 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 0. And any object like your my custom created object or a string class, a string buffer, yeah, any class object, that is the default value with a null. If you're not assigning any value, that considered as a null. And in the case of booleans, if you have a boolean variable, that default value to the false. But to be noted, these are the default value is only apply your field. Field means static variable or non-static variable inside a class. Okay. So next for your local variable, if your local variable are slightly different, the compiler will not, yeah, never assign default value to your uninitialized local variable. So please be note, the compiler is not assigning any default value for your local variable. Okay, if you cannot initialize your local variable where it is declared, make sure to assign it the value before you are trying to use it. Means if you can declare some variable local, at the declaration time you cannot initialize, but at that time compiler not force any kind of error. But when you are going to use, at that time compiler force you, you are trying to use the local variable that is not initialized. Okay, so assigning accessing any uninitialized local variable will result in compile time error. So compiler check it if you are using any variables that is not initialized, that is a local variable, compile give error. Okay, same I here I discussed usually. Here you can declare here local variable, not an issue. But here if you are going to use, this is the say variable p might be not initialized. So after that, before using, maybe here you can do anything, but here before using you can initialize the value like that, and then it's okay. So last the value which here I am initializing, the value which I is initializing, this is known as a kind of literals. What the value you are initializing, those known as a literals. So let's see about some guidelines about the literals. So you have a no key. Whenever I'm going to creating object, we are using the new keywords. But when we are not using any object, we are using any some primitive value. Okay, so the new keyword agent used to initialize the variable of a primitive data types. First things, new keyword is used to initialize your object, like your my class object abc, where we have created a new abc. Here 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 your my class abc, and here my data type user defined data type abc. This is the variable name your obj, and you are initializing with a new keyword. So generally all the object except only string class, you have to initialize with a new keyword. Okay, so primitive data types are special data types, okay, built in into the language, and they are not object. They are not objects created from a class. These are the not object created by a class. So a literal is a source code representation of a fixed value. The fixed value which you are assigned to the variable, that is a literal, and literals are represented directly into your code without requiring any computation, something like that. So it's possible to assign a literal to a variable and primitive data types. So all the primitive data types you can assign some literal, some value you can say. That value known as literals. In the case of boolean, you assign the true and false. So true is the literal for your boolean data types. Simply we have one character data types. You are assigning a single character. Single character you are assigning. This is the literal. And similarly byte b you assign some 100 value. This is the literal. This is the literal. This is the literal. So this is your data type This is your variable name. This is your literal value which you are assigning. Literals, we have generally data types for integer, for floating number, and for character. So for these, we have a different kind of literal. For integer literals, for float literal, for character literals. So integer literals. An integer literal is a type of long, and if it's in with the letter like a default value of long is a 0L or is capital letter or a small letter, so it's otherwise if you are not specifying, let's give assigning a variable 0 value. The by default this is the considered as your integer. If you want to assign as a long value, then you have to specify L. So it is recommended that you use the upper letter L, because L is in the so distinguished. If we write a small letter L and digit 1, this is so confused. So recommended is that you, whenever you want to assign integer literal as a long, and that time you have to specify your zero number than L. And these are the integral integral data types like byte, short, int, and log. All are the represent a number, not integer number. And if you create any int literals and the value type of long, that incompatible types. So please be ensure key for which data types, which literals are you assigning. Here are some base rules as well as that they have a like for a decimal number we have a base 10 as a mathematical. For hexadecimal we have follow the base 16, and for binary number we follow the base 2. So these kind of rules about the number systems. General if you talking about the for general purpose programming, the decimal system is likely the only number system you never use. You need to use another numbers for the following, like if you want to some hexadecimal number, then you have to use O0, and you want to some hexadecimal, then you use to your starting with a 0x. Similarly, if this is your number, you want to 26, this is a decimal number. If you want an hexadecimal number, so what would be the hexadecimal of 26? You convert hexadecimal and starting with a 0x and then your number. For the binary, you have to specify your 0 value and then your binary number. So you can assign a literal and a value with a proper depend upon the decimal number system or hexadecimal or binary system or as well as octa system as well as. So they support all the things. If we are talking about the floating point literal, generally we have float data types. We have two kind of float data types. One is the float, one is the double. So you can assign the value. If you are by default you are assigning the this value as a double or float. How consider? So you can append the value like F for floating number and T for your digit number. So whenever you are assigning like here, you can assign some with the float. This means you are a float letters you are assigning. For digit, we apply the D as well as. So digit letter. So be in the case of by default we will notice for integer letter by default your integer value. Similarly for floating letters by default Java support as a double. Okay, so if you want to assign some double variable, you can default value omit the D. Okay, omit the D, you can end with it. But if you want to specify the float, you have to must specify the F variable, F keywords here, so that they recognize you are assigning this letter to the floating variable. And for thought about the character and string letters. So generally, literal subtype characters and a string may contain your Unicode. Unicode means unsigned 16-bit memory data, and your system you can use such character directly in a code. Okay, if you can use the Unicode is some escape character, then you can use like this way slash, and you upload your code number similarly all the characters. And you always know he always use the single quote for your character. If you are assigning a character, you have to use single quote. For the character, you have use a single quote. For a string, you have to use double quote. Okay, and so single quote for single quote for character and double quote for your string. So this way letters are identified. Similarly, you can look here. So this is your double quote string literal, and if you assign here a single quote like R. So in this way, you can say this is your single quote for your character literal. This is the double quote for your string literal. So sometime the Java language supports some few special escape sequence. You can use for the character as well as string literals, like slash b for backspace, like slash n for new line, slash f for your feed. So let's example here. I have a let's I have a string. Yes, a string s is equal to Ajay Ravi. Okay, and if you write in the ss, okay, so if you run it, it's just print your complete step. But here maybe some escape character like a new line, yeah, feedback, if available accordingly. Why not run? So this is it. Let's here you apply the slash n. So slash n is the so this is the your escape sequence. This is not a printing, but the actual meaning of slash n is a new line. So they this string is this string skip this special converter and apply the meaning what the slash n mean. Some when the place about the some string character. So here the here is the Ajay slash n means a new line. So they are interpret the meaning of new line. So they have this is the some you can say your escape sequence. You have to notice you can maybe encounter in your application maybe slash b or so if you want to sub tab space slash 8 new line then this other. So that means Java as a language support these escape sequence in our string letters as well as the character letters. And the last about the literal, I'm talking about the special case about the object. If okay, so let's about talking why not talking. So about the null literals. So any object if you are not assigning anything that will be considered as your null literals. Okay, and you can say null may be assigned to any variable except the primitive data types. You cannot assign to the primitive data types, and this little you can do the null value beyond the testing and something. So we ensure that null is a literal value which can be assigned to any object, but this null cannot be assigned to any variable. Like here, if you try to assign here as a string uh, pp equal to here, you can assign null. Okay, but if you trying to assign integer vv equal to null, they not allow because the null is the not any kind of a primitive integer is not kind of any class. This is the inbuilt primitive data type. So you cannot assign null to any primitive data types, but you can assign null to any object. This is a string class object. That's my abc, and here you can also assign the null. So all the object can accept default value is null, but the primitive type doesn't cannot allow to the null. Okay, so finally it's also a special kind of literals called as a class literal. So null you known as a class literals, and from formed by taking the type name and appending dot class as well as so the string dot class before. um, if about talking about the some using sometime use underscore in the literals. So in any number systems from Java 7 onwards, if you want to add the higher number, not to 1 2 3 4 let's say 10,565. So for reading purpose, sometime Java 7 allow you can use underscore inside your any digit number as well as in numerical number. Okay, so that your number can easily, as a human being we can read easily. So let's say about you talking about this long number. So if you're not using this underscore, might be reading the problem. But here you can read key 1, 2, 3, 4, then maybe thousands, like and something else. So from Java 7 onwards, they allow you can use the underscore inside your number systems. It's also used in binary system as well as you can use the byte system, long system, all the number systems you can use here, as well as a floating point number you can use here. So underscore just for human readability, so that whenever developer read the code, that can easily read the that long values. And you can also you can place the underscore only between the digits. Okay, you cannot place underscore between the underscore and the following places, like at the beginning of or end of the number. You cannot place the beginning and end of the number. So P ensures the underscore is only placed between the number and adjacent to the decimal point in and the floating point letters. And you also prior to any like prefix F and L you cannot use. And the positions where the strings of digit is expected. Right? So these are the some places. We only notice that you can use this underscore between the number systems. And these are the some examples where you can say some valids and invalid case. So invalid scenario here cannot put the underscore here before the dot. Invalid scenario cannot put underscore to the decimal dot. Means before the dot and after that you cannot put. Similarly, you cannot put the before your maybe L or F or your suffix about the your letters. So these are the invalid scenario. The please take while putting it. Similarly, also some invalid case here in the case of if your number is completed and the last uh, digit cannot be underscore. Okay, but if you 5 underscore you can use this is the okay. And but similarly for if you go to the hexadecimal number, you cannot place underscore between the 0 to x. Similarly, you cannot put after the x. This is the starting positions of your number, hexadecimal 0x, and then you start 52 number. So here you cannot use. Similarly, but between the digit 5 and 2, between these two you can use. This is the okay. So similarly you can use for other as well as. So the last, I'm going to summarize the point which we have discussed. Java programming language use both fields and the variables. Okay, so sometime you can serve field and some variable. Variable essentially refer as a local variable as a parameter, which what you are passing, and field generally refer as your class variable, instance variable, field variable. So instance variable, a non-static variable, known as your sometime each instance of a class. So now instance variable for each instance, this is the separate copy, and class variable known as a static field variable. This is for your static data member, and this is there is exactly one copy of a class variable, regardless of how many times the class has been instanced. If you create 10 objects, the static data member have only one copy. And the local variable store the local variable store temporary state inside the method, and the parameters are variables that are provide the extra information to the method. For both local variable and parameter variable always classified as a local variable, you cannot say the field. And when you are saying a local variable, you have to ensure that local variable by default not initialize the default value. When naming your field and variable, you have to just follow the all the rules and convention which I discussed. And about the 8 primitive data types we have discussed: byte, short, int, long, and float, double, boolean, and char. And the one special class object strings for the sequence of characters we are using. So please be sure compiler will assign a reasonable default value for the fields of the above data types. All the data types have, and all the data types declare inside as a class instance variable or a non-instance variable. In those cases, compiler will assign default value. For the local variables, default value is never assigned by the compiler. And we are last discussed about the literal source code. What the value we are assigning? Literals are basically represent a fixed value. That is the fixed value, and fixed value is assigned to any data types. Okay, so uh, that's a complete today discussion. And again, I will try to say thank you for watching this video.